Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Steps podcast. I'm Lou, and I am delighted to be hosting this podcast. This is a space where we share our experiences and reflections of entering into the Steps process. Steps, if you don't know, is a 12-week journey towards freedom, which is based on the well-known 12-step process, and this one is centered on the Christian faith. We often assume that 12-step programs are only for people with obvious addictions such as drugs and alcohol, but here we reveal how using these 12 steps can bring about profound hope and change at a personal level, no matter what addiction, behaviour or thought pattern is holding us back. Every episode, we share and reflect on the raw and unfiltered personal journeys of three participants, Jamie, Lars and me, Lou. We share how we began, grew and are still very much growing in this journey towards inner peace and freedom.
Today we are going to be talking about the Serenity Prayer. And the Serenity Prayer is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So the thing with the Serenity Prayer is that it is such a well-known, famous prayer. So many people say it. Obviously, all the 12-step recovery groups, to my knowledge, say it. And I don't know about you both, but I've often seen it on posters. I've heard people of all faiths or none saying the Serenity Prayer. And I think it would be good to talk a bit about why is it such a powerful prayer? We say it every week on Steps. And it is a really meaningful prayer, but I'm also aware that there are so many prayers in any day that we could say, and there is so much busyness in the day. So what is the value of saying the Serenity Prayer, and how could it help us? So this is the topic for discussion today. Jamie, why don't you tell us a bit about your experience of saying the Serenity Prayer and maybe what it's meant to you?
Well, I'd done Steps twice before I'd even clocked the Serenity Prayer. So I'd been in the sessions, I'd prayed it at the end, and I hadn't thought anything of it. And I was in a group, and a lady on her very, very first week said, "Wow, the Serenity Prayer, it's had such an impact on my anxiety and worry." And suddenly I looked at it and thought, it's a light bulb moment. I looked at it again and thought, wow, this is so powerful, and it's such a roadmap through the day. And I went back and really meditated on it and considered it and thought, okay, what is this saying? And how did it have such a huge impact on this lady?
Yeah, brilliant. I love that you've just been saying it and not really thinking too much about it. Lars, how about you? What would you say has been the impact for you of saying the Serenity Prayer?
It's hard to say, to be honest, what exact impact it has had. The meaning of it is extremely important to me, the meaning of the Serenity Prayer. There is a balance in the prayer that has really helped me a lot. There is an image of God in the prayer, which I have found extremely helpful. I think it's a prayer that really allows me to be a fragile human being on the one hand, and then on the other hand, it's full of hope, because it also involves a God who can cover the things that I'm not capable of myself. So for me, I think it's almost like compass is probably not the right word, but that's what's coming to my mind. It's simply, I use it as part of my navigation, so to speak. So there are situations where I really come to think of the Serenity Prayer, and I wonder, is this something that is happening now? Is that is this my responsibility to have courage to do something here? Or is this one which is just on God, and I just need to leave it with him and be happy with that? So it's part of my navigation system.
I know exactly what you mean, because when I say it sometimes, and now I've kind of got into the habit because I've done Steps a number of times, I will say it often daily, maybe not every day, but often daily. And I find in the moment when I say it, I feel re-centered. Whereas before I might have felt like I'm here, there, and everywhere. There's something about it that almost helps me slow down enough to check in with myself. And I so easily want to take control over things I don't need to take control over. I worry about things that I have no control over. And there's something about saying the prayer that just reorients me and shifts my perspective. But I think because there's so many really helpful ideas and themes in the Serenity Prayer, let's take it line by line and just have a quick discussion about the meaning and how helpful each line is. So, God grant me the serenity. Lars, why don't you kick us off? Tell us your thoughts on this line.
Well, how much time do you have? So, because it starts with God. So, I mean, that's a whole universe opening up, isn't it? Because it makes a world of difference. I can ask the same thing, but it makes a world of difference who I am asking this thing about. So even with two good friends like you guys, it would be different if I asked you about one thing and asked Jamie about the very same thing, because I have different images of you. I'm not going into that now, so don't worry about it. You look frightened, Lou.
I'm intrigued.
But so there's my whole God image somehow immediately comes into play. What do I think of him? What do I believe of him? Does he have the willingness? Does he have the power to grant me serenity? Because serenity, I believe, is what we all really, really want. To have a soul which is grounded, a soul which is in a peaceful place. So I act not out of nervousness. I act not out of a need to prove myself. I act not out of fear or anything like that, but I act from a secure place. So it's almost like, to me, my inner image of this is a family picture, actually, seeing parents with a child where the relationships are really, really good. And you see the safety of the child acting out of a secure attachment, acting out of a secure, grounded place. And you can see how much the child is alive and can explore the world because it comes from this place. In a way, that's serenity. And we lose that as we grow up, most of us. So there's something really coming back to something that we as human beings really need and long for in the whole serenity concept. And then it's asking God, and who is he for it?
We also lose it because we live in a broken world. So we often don't experience that kind of healthy family dynamic. So, which means we need it all the more. I love that when I say God grant me the serenity, it reminds me that it's only God that can really bring me that level of serenity. I've tried getting it in other places. It does not work. It might work for like 10, 15 minutes, but ultimately it doesn't work. And it's a way of me reminding myself that serenity comes from God. And it's him that I can look to, rather than someone who is essentially going to disappoint me, because they're human. Jamie, what about you? What are your thoughts on this first line?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo what you guys have said. I think this whole thing of God grant me, God give it to me, it's a gift. It's not coming from within me, it's coming from you. And I think as God sharing his perspective, his nature, he is the God of peace, and he's releasing who he is to me so that I have a window on the world that's a totally different window to the one I normally have. So I need supernatural grace in order to actually accept reality. I think for me, it's, as a person, as a gifting, I would be a futuristic, visionary, creative, imaginary person, a person with an imagination. And I desperately need serenity to accept reality the way that it is. So that, yeah, we're going to come later on it to change the things I can. But I need that gift of calm, tranquility, peace, a clear, unclouded mind, so that I can actually navigate this life well.
I just so agree with that, Jamie. And you could say, looking at it from one perspective, the things I cannot change, you could look at it and say, what a tragedy. There are things that I can't change. And it would also, I guess, go against some current ideologies where you can do anything, you can change everything, you have it within your power. We have the American dream, which I guess is also a UK dream or whatever a country dream. It's there, this sense of, if you just give yourself to it, if you really pull yourself together, then you can. That's there. And of course, there's some dynamic in that. I understand that. I respect that even. But it's just not the truth. For all of us, there are things that we cannot change for all sorts of reasons. We are facing a reality, like you say, Jamie, where we simply can't change it. We don't have the power within us. And I think what the process has taught me, as I've been living in it for years, is to come to a place where I really love that part. And I love it more and more. My own way of describing it is, I call it the spirituality of the little one. So, and I'm enjoying more and more, even though I am becoming of age. I'm really enjoying to be the little one, because being the little one who cannot change this and that and that, and it feels like it's growing. Well, it just means that there's that more room for God doing his bit.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating what you're saying, because I had not even thought about that when I've looked at that second line, to accept the things I cannot change. I hadn't really considered consciously the kind of almost like an enjoyment that I can't change some things, like it's out of my hands. I've always been very much resistant, like I want to be able to change things. And like in that line, the thing that stands out to me is acceptance. And I'm like, oh, this is the battle I have, because I struggle to accept it. There's so much in me that wants to still change things. But this, as you're speaking, I'm like, oh, there's such a peace and tranquility about just accepting it. And what I really like about this is in the context of a prayer. So my default will be to try and accept this and try and do whatever I can to have the right mindset. But this is a prayer asking God that he would help me accept the things I cannot change. And that just takes the burden off, doesn't it? Because, you know, who needs to be walking around with the weight of like trying to, you know, work at trying to accept things and making peace with things that we can't change. So I really love that it's within a prayer context.
I have an image that may or may not be helpful for us, but I remember as a child, there was on the road where we were living, I think I was 4 or 5 years old. There was this big guy, at least in my eyes, he was really, really big. And somehow he just had this idea that he wanted to bully me. So he was on my case and he threatened me, and I was really, really scared of him. And one day he kind of caught me, and I was running for my life. And I just got into our house, and there was a builder in the house who was also a friend of the family. And was a really, really strong builder, lots of muscles there. And he asked me, so Lars, what's going on? And I said, well, there's this guy on the road and he's after me. And then he said, well, come with me, let's go look for him. And then he took my hand. And then we went out on the road. So suddenly the road, which had been my road of fear, now was a total road of safety. I did not fear meeting this guy on the road. I was hoping to meet him so my guy could beat him up. And that was basically what I was hoping for. And in a way, that's one of my inner images of serenity, to kind of, instead of walking the road alone, the fearful road, I have this big God with me, and that does give serenity, because it's not on me any longer. I'm still in the picture. I'm still there. I'm still walking. I'm still being me, but not me alone any longer. There's someone who can handle this thing that I definitely couldn't handle on my own.
I love that. I love that image.
And I think the other amazing thing about acceptance is how it breaks really powerful mindsets that can create paralysis and take us prisoner. I think that acceptance can break the power of regret. Like, it's not just about the future, it's accepting it's the process of accepting the past, the things that can't be changed. I think it breaks, for me, trying to answer unanswerable questions. I think it gives a peace that's beyond understanding. I mean, if I need to understand everything and can only be at peace when I understand and comprehend and can control, then I can't have a peace that's beyond understanding. And I think, like your picture there, Lars, of, the big one who protects and guards and leads you, it's trusting, this God actually understands everything instantaneously, and he's got answers to questions that we can't answer, but he knows, and he knows what he's doing. And so I think they're all huge parts. And I think as well, it breaks the need to control people. Because one of the things I've noticed is people do exactly what they want to do. And, and I love this quote that one guy said. He said, on a really, really good day, maybe I can control myself and tell myself what to do when I do it. So I think acceptance has a real load of applications and freedom-giving opportunities.
It's so true, isn't it? Because so often our issues are around trying to control other people or other situations. And, read all the psychology books. They say all you can do is control your own response. You can't control theirs. And I'm just thinking of the number of psychology articles and books I've read about. So much of the kind of human struggle is when we don't accept things, and the resistance. And I'm thinking of acceptance and commitment therapy, which I know, Lars, you're familiar with, and how when we accept something, we are and make peace with it, suddenly what we're carrying, the weight, it just goes. It feels less intense, and we feel more able to move forward. It's the struggle that ties us up in knots. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced it personally, but I can totally identify with this. I remember even reading, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, but Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, and talking about how when we live in the present moment, that's when we can experience freedom. And so I'm just so glad that this line is in the Serenity Prayer, because it's so kind of fundamental to our well-being and flourishing.
Because I think our classic understanding of, say, peace or tranquility or calm or serenity is the absence of problems. And I think that's part of the trap for us, is we believe there's a destination where there's no grief, there's no challenge, there's no tough emotions, there's no unanswered questions, there's no difficulty, all the ducks are lining up. And then we think, when that happens, then I'll be at peace. But the Serenity Prayer is saying, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change. So it's an invitation to live a life that could be surrounded by disappointment, pain, things not adding up the way you thought they would, and yet in the midst of it have a peace that you can't really understand where it comes from and how it works. But definitely, I think that gets us off the kind of treadmill, hamster wheel that so much of our society is about, is one day when I feel this way, one day when I don't ever struggle, one day when I have no more doubts. It's actually accepting ourselves in the midst of the process too.
Totally agree. I'm like, yes, amen. So the next line of the Serenity Prayer is the courage to change the things I can, which is a biggie, isn't it? Jamie, tell us what your thoughts on this line.
I enjoy this line because I think it brings the healthy responsibility that I really need. So I think this is like the action part, the responsibility part. Like, for example, in step 7, when we think about replacement strategies and new priorities and practices, it's an exciting part because I think it's the part that is inviting in the hope and the agency. I think it's the part that's saying you're made for something. You're on this planet for a reason. There's dreams that you can dream. There's adventures to go on. There's things that you can do that's actually eventually possibly going to change how you feel.
Again, it's that kind of healthy perspective, isn't it? It's like it's God taking control, but then there are things that we can do and change as well. So it's not all on God, it's not all on us. There's this healthy kind of dynamic where we have a part to play, and ultimately we leave the rest to Him. And I really like that about that, and I really hear what you're saying, Jamie. Lars, what about you? What are your thoughts on this line?
Well, it's a hugely important line, isn't it? And it gives a wonderful balance to the first line. And it is really important to learn what is on God and what is on me. In my experience, I easily mix it up. So to give an example, I sometimes use the picture of a scale and then a mirror. So mirror as an example of identity, all of the things that kind of shapes my identity, that creates my image of myself. And with that also belongs all the things that has happened to me in the past, how I was wired biologically, and my neurons and the rest of it. All of that is part of identity. And I often end up spending a lot of time in front of the mirror, having a lot of thoughts about that and really wanting to do something about this thing. The reality is almost everything to do with the mirror belongs to God, because there's very little I can do about it. But then on the scales kind of telling me, so how much do I weigh? Of course, there are genetics, there are other things involved there as well. It's not all on me. I'm fully aware of that. And perhaps more is on genetics that we are aware of. But still, there are things I can do. And I've been through that. There was a time in my life where I really had to make a firm decision. And it wouldn't have helped me just to stand on the scale and say, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't
The crisps.
yeah, exactly. It wouldn't have helped me. I had to make firm decisions about, well, what do I eat? How often do I eat? And how much do I put on the plate? And change my habits. I had to go out exercising and things like that, and find help to do that. So I didn't just put it all on me, but it was on me to find help and to do the things. So I mean, that's how the balance works for me. And that's why this sentence is so hugely important. And I think there is also, sorry if this becomes a bit long answer, but there is this thing about, I think there's a correspondence between these two sentences. I think sentence number 2, the courage to do the things I can, is part of praying. So my action is also a prayer, that I kind of tell God, I'm really invested in this, that I'm also inviting you into.
I think an example for me would be, say, ongoing even in this moment, how the two parts of the prayer kind of interact. Say I've got to say something that's maybe there's a moment for confrontation, or maybe I need to say what I need, or maybe I need to talk about boundaries, or maybe I have to give some feedback. There's in me, say, anxiety. There's some fear. There's some fear of loss. There might be some fear of being disempowered, or being misunderstood, or being judged. I put all those in the first part of the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change. That's going on inside me. That's the anxiety. But the courage part, the bit where I look at actually how can I respond, how can I change, might be, can I formulate a strategy? So when I have difficult conversations, something that you said to me, Lars, why don't you formulate a few conversation starters so that you think, I'm going to make a decision to be courageous. I want to be honest. I want to be clear and kind in every interaction. That's the bit that's going to take the courage. I'm going to need some help. So the activity I can do, the action I can do, something that's in my ability and power is to formulate some sentence starters and to say, okay, I find this difficult. I'm not that great at communicating when it's a little bit difficult situation, but here's what I feel. Here's what I see. Here's what I'm experiencing. I want to be really clear and kind. I want to be honest. And I think then I'm taking appropriate responsibility. I think without courage, there's just freezing, there's just silence, there's just unspoken words. So the courage is to take that and bring it out and do what I can do. And the remarkable thing is, in taking courage, that breaks a whole load of stuff. It stops the build up of frustration inside. It stops the build up of anger, and it stops gossip and talking about people instead of to people. So yeah, courage actually can absolutely change your life in creating brand new habits.
I'm so pleased that it talks about courage, because it often, when I'm looking at this third line of changing the things I can, I'm learning, especially when I'm in the steps process, I'm learning to do things in a new way. And I guess, as you were saying, Jamie, it reminds me of how scary it can be. Like if I've had a kind of lifetime of saying yes when I mean no, to start kind of putting in new habits and rhythms is a really scary thing to do. And I, like you, Jamie, can often be in freeze mode and feel like, oh, just not sure if I can do this. And so asking for courage in that moment, it reminds me that it's something that I don't already have and that God wants to give me. And it also reminds me of, being back at step one in my powerlessness. God, I can't do this without you. So please give me the courage that I need, because I know that I do need courage, because I'm learning a new way of doing something. And it can be quite a scary process.
I love these examples. And as you're saying what you're saying, Lou, I'm reminded of a friend of mine who had the same issue of really having a difficulty saying no to people. So she actually ended up making a card that she had with her in her back pocket. So she took up the card that said no because she couldn't really. So that was her way into learning to have more healthy boundaries. So I was just reminded of that. But that was a courageous thing for her to do. For me, working on pride for quite a bit, one of my things was that I was quite often flying under the radar when I was in a meeting. I was really conscious about what is the opinion of the others of me. That was extremely important to me. So I was basically trying to control other opinions about me in the room. So part of what I was, and there was a lot of that I just needed to ask serenity to accept things I cannot change. The whole character issue of pride, I had to leave with God, because that I couldn't transform myself. But in the concrete situation, it was a decision about, I will not leave a meeting without having made myself known what I really feel and what I really think. And that was hugely helpful. But it did take courage, particularly in the beginning, to do that, because I knew this is going to alter what these people are thinking about me. This is going to alter the dynamics in the room, and I will be in new territory that I don't know how to control. So so that's just another example of it.
Yeah, I like that. It's leaving that, like you say, you left the pride with God to fix ultimately, but it's you played your part in small behavior change that kind of makes room for God to be able to bring that healing, which I really love.
I love how, as well, I remember listening to Brené Brown, the writer and social scientist, saying that before she says yes to something, she pauses and rotates her wedding ring, one full rotation, just to work out what her response is. So it's not a quick people please, or it's not saying yes out of shame or fear. So I think there are techniques that we can develop that just buy us time, slow us down, help us to work out, am I doing or saying this for the wrong reason?
Yeah, I like that. There's one thing about when I read this line, my default sometimes is to be, because I can be over responsible, and that sometimes I try and manipulate things to the point so I'm like trying to do God's work for him. So I'm like, oh, and I can do this, this, and this. And this is why I love the last line and the wisdom to know the difference, because I know I don't have that wisdom in my own strength, because I make choices. Like, so for example, I could think, maybe I could try and do some more things for other people. Or if okay, one example. So if sometimes in the past, what I've done is, instead of saying yes, I'll say no, but then I'll try and do something else to almost make up for it. And so I don't know if this connects this story, but it's that idea of kind of, oh, where am I going with that? I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know. If I'm left to my own devices, I will create a story that justifies some behaviors when that's not necessarily what I need to be doing. And so this line of wisdom to know the difference, like what I need to try and get involved in and what I don't, how much responsibility I should take and not, I just need that wisdom so much. So the last two lines are really linked for me, because I'm learning, and I'm kind of, I guess I'm learning to know what I should be changing and what I shouldn't, if that makes sense.
To me, this line is almost also like a prayer that includes an answer to prayer in itself, because very often I have found I just need to pray the line, and then I know, which is what I know, what I instinctively need to leave with God. I can't handle this, and I know what I need to do something about. So this wisdom very often is also about acceptance, really accept where things belong, because that's at least sometimes my struggle. Do I really want to leave this thing with God, or wouldn't I prefer to have some sort of control with it myself? And I can be lazy at times. So there is some in the second line as well, where I'm a bit like, I just don't bother. I just don't want to have this struggle to find the courage to do whatever. So sometimes all of that comes into a reality, just praying the line. There is a sense of light coming over what's going on the inside, just praying the wisdom to know the difference, I think.
Jamie, what are your views on the last line?
A really important part for me in this is actually God's responsibility to speak to me in a way that I can actually hear. And so that happens in loads of different ways for me. It can be like a nudge. I remember recently I'd asked God a question in the morning, and I was looking at a whole list of podcasts to listen to, and I just felt a very small nudge saying, listen to that one. I was listening to it in the background, and then I suddenly heard a small voice say, pause it here. The next section's going to be the answer to your question from this morning. Go and make yourself a coffee. I made myself a coffee, took it upstairs, and it basically, the guy on the podcast completely gave the answer to the question I'd given. And so I think the wisdom can come in lots of different ways. It can come from those kind of weird moments like that. It can come through speaking to a person or watching a movie, and you suddenly think that for some reason feels like God's voice. There's wisdom in that, and then going back and watching it again.
Yeah, this wisdom theme, I definitely think we should talk about again another time, because there's how do you hear and receive wisdom? Like you're talking about kind of the nudges that come, and I think it would be really good to explore that in more detail. Like, what does this wisdom look like on a practical level? But for now, let's just give one quick encouragement to anyone listening about the Serenity Prayer. I'll go first to give you a bit of time to think. And mine would be this: when you pray it, and And when I pray it slow. I try and pray it slowly, because times when I rush through it, I'm not connecting with how I'm really feeling and what's going on and the significance of each line. And when I pray it slowly, it allows me to really check in with myself. And when I read it slowly, some parts jump out to me more than others. And that's often just what I need in that moment. So my suggestion and encouragement is to, whenever you say it slowly and allow that space to just pause and reflect. Lars?
I totally agree. So read slowly. I would also say read regularly. So kind of make it part of your inner equipment, so to speak, what you have ready when situations come your way, that prayer is just very ready to be prayed in whatever situation. So that does often take a period of time where I intentionally prayed quite often on a daily basis. Then it just sits there. Then it kind of just becomes a natural part of prayer life, or the way I lead my life.
Yeah, I would say use it as a kind of meditative tool. So break it up like we've done in this podcast. You say, God, I'm coming to you. I need something that you've got. I can't get it for myself. I'm looking to you. Maybe if you like running or cycling or sport, just talk it out loud, meditate on it, chew it over, and really dig deep in it.
Brilliant. Love it. And on that note, Jamie, why don't you say the Serenity Prayer as we close?
Yeah, God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Amen.
Amen.